So we've gone over sound effects and music. Now it's time to talk about your voice. And if you're doing a gaming video or presenting to camera, or simply filming someone and using a microphone to pick up what they're saying, then you may want to enhance that voice to make it sound clearer. First, a few reminders though. Don't forget that you can link and unlink your audio from the footage by using the shortcut Control and L or Command and L. You can also adjust the audio gain by using the shortcut G on your keyboard. Second, before we go into different effects, let's talk about recording audio directly into Premiere Pro with a microphone. I do this whenever I want to record a voiceover, as it is extremely simple. So make sure that you have a free track on your timeline. And if you do not, then you right-click on the gray space on your timeline and select Add Track. A tip here, each track has a letter and a number, A1, A2, and A3, V1, B2, and V3. A stands for audio, followed by the number of which audio track it is. And V, you guessed it, stands for video. So let's create a new audio track for voiceover purposes. Now you need to make sure that you have this little microphone symbol next to your track. If you don't, right-click and go to Customize. You will see the microphone symbol, and as you hover over it, it should say VoiceOver Record. Now drag that from this window back onto the track on the timeline. You should see the microphone now, and if you don't, expand the audio track and you'll see the little microphone there. Right-click again and go to VoiceOver Record Settings. Premiere will now show you all of your audio sources plugged into the computer. Click on the drop-down menu and choose your microphone or audio interface. If you're not seeing your microphone, then head to Preferences, go to Audio Hardware, and it should be available as your default input. This setting will also make sure Premiere Pro sees your microphone as your default way of recording audio. While in these settings, you should turn down your latency. Latency is the delay in the transporting of data from your mic to the computer to the headphones. And you want that delay to be as little as possible. So turn it down as low as it gets. Of course, there's the question of why you would want high latency in the first place. If you start suffering from the audio dropping out, then turn this back up, as it gives your computer more time to process the data. And your computer may not be high spec enough to have such a short latency. But essentially, the shorter the better where possible. Just click OK when the settings are optimal. You're now ready to record. Put your playhead on the timeline where you want to start recording and press that little microphone button. By default, you should get a 3-second countdown, and then it will start recording. Just press that little microphone again to stop recording, or hit the spacebar, which is a lot easier. You can turn off the countdown by right-clicking, going back into VoiceOver Record Settings, and unticking the box next to Pre-roll. And finally, in the VoiceOver Record Settings, you will see this bar that moves up and down and changes color. That's basically how loud your recording is going to be. You want to make sure that at most, you're touching the yellow. And for the most part, you want to be on the top tip of the green. This will ensure that you're not clipping, which is when your recording goes too loud or becomes muffled. If your audio touches red, then you are clipping and it will sound awful. With that in mind, there should be settings on your microphone or audio interface that will allow you to adjust your gain. And if not, then you want to physically position yourself far enough away from the microphone not to clip. The quality of your recording will come from your microphone. If you cannot afford a microphone, I highly recommend using your phone and then sending the recording to your computer. However, good audio is essential for video creation, and a decent microphone is well worth the investment, as is a pop filter, which is one of those fabric discs that attaches to a mic, as they are good for stopping plosives like P and B from sounding muffled. Now, let's say that you have your audio ready to go, whether that's voice, sound effects, or music, and you want them to sound better. The best audio tool in Premiere Pro's arsenal is the parametric equalizer. It essentially does what it says on the tin. It equalizes the noise how you see fit. If you want more high-end and less bass, you use the equalizer. You'll find this in the effects panel. Just type in parametric equalizer in the search bar or find it in audio effects. Then just drag and drop the parametric equalizer onto your audio clip. I should also note that a lot of people use the term EQ as short for equalizer. Now go into the Effect Controls panel and find the parametric equalizer effect and press on the box that says Edit. You'll now have a box that appears in the middle of the screen that shows you the frequency spectrum of the audio waveform as it plays through. The frequency goes from low on the left, which is bassy, and high on the right, which is the high pitches. You can then use the boxes on the audio to boost a certain frequency or turn it down. By taking away the highs, for instance, you will sound like you've been stuffed into a small room. Then when you cut out the lows, it's like you're on a walkie-talkie. We can use the EQ to make certain aspects of our audio shine. Let's talk about voice first though. You probably want to turn on this high-pass filter by clicking the box next to HP. This will take away the really low bass notes that your microphone has picked up, helping your voice sound clearer. And you probably want to drag along the high-pass filter a little more, to around the 60 point, as those low frequencies will muffle the audio as a whole, but do not really affect your voice. Doing this will also cut some room noise. Now you probably want to enhance some of the bass around the 100 point to make your voice sound fuller, and then also enhance your voice at the high end to make it sound clearer. You can do this just by moving around these boxes, and you will see this line on the EQ change, showing you how the frequencies will be affected. Play around and find what you like. Many people also take away some of the mid frequencies to enhance clarity and stop the audio muddying with any potential music. There are also some preset EQs available in the parametric equalizer effect. Just click on the box at the top of the EQ for a drop-down selection. For voice, you can choose Vocal Enhancer, which is a decent EQ for any voice. And that's equalizing vocals. If your vocals are over the top of music, then something worth bearing in mind is not having the frequencies on both match each other. For instance, if you have more high frequencies and vocals, which is recommended, you may want to EQ your music so that the high frequencies are turned down a little. This allows your vocals to shine in that frequency and not become muddied by the music. It's like if you had a big band and everyone was playing bass guitar, you wouldn't be able to tell the notes apart and they would become muddy. And that's super important with voices, as you need to be able to hear clearly what people are saying. Now, if your voice is constantly going up and down in volume and you want the lowest volumes to be raised and the highest volumes to be turned down, you can use something called a compressor. This will compress or squash down your voice so that it stays at a relatively even volume and doesn't change as much. To add a compressor, head back to your effects panel and search compressor. Here you want to add a single band compressor. This is once again under audio effects. Drag and drop the compressor onto your audio file. This will add it to the effect controls on this clip. Head there and then click Edit under compressor. A box will now appear in the middle of the screen. The quickest way to get a decent effect is to simply choose the voice thickener preset from the drop-down menu. This will apply all the appropriate settings to your voice, raising the quiet moments and quietening the loud ones. You can then select the volume you want to maintain by sliding the output gain. Just make sure when you do this that your audio levels are in the right place, sitting at the top of the green bar and only just touching the yellow. If your voice now sounds slightly off, you can open up the EQ and have a play around. You may want these effects across all the audio clips on a single track. I mean, if you've cut up your audio, you don't want to be individually applying the same settings to each audio file. You want the same setting applied to all of them. To do exactly that, we're going to add a new window to our top left panel. Head up to Window at the top of the screen and select Audio Track Mixer. You will now have your audio tracks all next to each other and with the master settings for each track displayed in a row. From here, you can turn up an entire track by increasing the gain, or you can pan the sound so it comes out from the right speaker or the left speaker using this knob. I don't normally play around with too many of these settings, as for the most part, you're wanting to play with individual audio files rather than loads at once. But for us now, we want to add an effect to everything that's on one of the tracks. So expand the effects rack using this little drop-down arrow in the top left. You will now have multiple gray boxes appear. You can add effects using the drop-down menus. So choose the parametric equalizer effect on the first audio track. Bring up the settings by double-clicking on the effect name in that gray box. Use the Vocal Enhancer preset. And now everything that sits in that audio track has the same preset applied to it. If you're getting confused by which track is which, you can rename your tracks. So let's create a new track by right-clicking on the timeline, Add New Track. Let's move all of our voiceover to this track. In the audio track mixer, you can rename the track. Let's call it voiceover. Let's right-click and copy the parametric equalizer effect we've just made and paste it onto this track. And there we go, the voiceover track is now all equalized. We can then add another effect, the compressor, and compress the entire track. Your voice is now sounding awesome. Let's also take those sound effects off the original voiceover so we don't double up on effects.
simply go into the effect controls and hit delete. Or right-click on the audio file and click Remove Attributes. And then with all of those effects selected, hit OK.
And if you're wondering what the track on the very right-hand side of the audio track mixer is, that's the master for all the audio combined. You probably don't want to add anything here just yet, as adding effects here really limits your flexibility when it comes to individual audio files. But we'll come back to that later. You should now feel pretty familiar with adding some audio effects to individual tracks, and I want to point out another effect that I use all the time: reverb. Head into your effects panel and then type in reverb. Then drag and drop Studio Reverb onto the audio file you want to add reverb to. Go into your effect controls panel and choose Edit under Reverb to bring up the settings. There are plenty of presets to choose from that will make you sound like you're in a huge hall or in a smallish room. To increase the reverb, you can slide up the wet setting, which makes your reverb last longer.
This is reverb.
Reverb is really good for making things sound distant or more epic. It's an effect that's well worth playing around with, as it can make your sound effects sound deeper. Just adding a little bit of reverb to your voice can make it sound fuller if you have no music underneath.
This is reverb.
If you have unwanted room noise in a recording because maybe you recorded in a large room with no soundproofing, then there's a tool to help with that. Back in the effects panel, type in denoiser and drag and drop the denoiser effect onto your audio clip. Go to Effect Controls and click Edit under the denoiser effect. Another box will come up in the middle of your screen. There's a slider that you can pull right, which stops all the noise under a certain level from coming through. You can pull that same slider left to make sure that all the noise comes through. The more to the right you pull the slider, the less noise will come through. How much you want to take away from the audio is totally down to your ears. I recommend using this sparingly, as it does have a pretty drastic effect on your audio. However, if there's a constant hum noise in the background, this can be really useful for getting that unwanted noise cut out of your recording.
Oh, this thing? Don't worry about it. Oh, this thing? Don't worry about it.
And now we come on to one of the best audio tools that Premiere Pro has to offer: fading audio in and out. This is so key for when you're wanting to introduce new music or transition into a new song. Or maybe you want an effect to slowly come in rather than just happen, or your vocals to slowly fade out as you move into another room. And it's just really useful to use on your audio clips. To add a fade, once again, return to the Effects panel and search for Crossfade. This isn't under Audio Effects, but is instead under Audio Transitions, as this is a transition. There are 3 different types of crossfade, and I'll go over them one by one. But to apply them, it's the same method. Let's start with constant gain. Drag and drop the effect onto the end of your clip.
You'll know when you can drop it, as the end of the clip will glow blue.
Now as you play through the audio clip, the gain decreases at a constant level until it reaches 0 by the end of the clip. You'll notice this little yellow box, and by dragging the yellow box so it's longer, the fade time increases, while making it smaller decreases the fade time. Wherever the yellow box starts, that's where the fade starts. I personally find constant gain quite jarring, as the audio cuts out very suddenly. The next crossfade is called constant power, which gives you a smoother fade. Once more, drag and drop it onto the end of your audio clip, and you'll notice that the gain increases slowly at first and then faster at the end. But let's undo this one too. Onto the crossfade that I primarily use, which is exponential fade. This one allows for the audio to curve into the fade, meaning it's more subtle and smoother. Let's drag and drop that onto the end and have a listen. You can once again change the duration of the fade by moving the yellow box around. And if you cannot see the yellow box, be sure to zoom in on the timeline using the plus and minus keys so that you can see and alter the box. To make audio fade in, it's the exact same principle, except you drag and drop the crossfade onto the start of the clip. You will now notice the gain subtly increase on the audio clip, and you can change the duration of the crossfade by pulling on that yellow box.
Another alternative is to right-click the end of your clip and add the default transition. I recommend setting the crossfade as default audio transition.
And that's a rundown on all of the major effects that you can add to your audio files. As you did at the end of the last section, play around with these effects and find your personal preferences. And also to note, you can use audio presets that you find online just like you did with the transition presets. For instance, you might have found a deep vocal audio preset that you've imported into Premiere Pro, and you can drag and drop that onto your audio. Hopefully with the knowledge that I've given you, you won't need to look too far and you should be an audio effects wizard. In the next section, we'll do one final look at audio and the things you should look out for. Until then, don't blow out your speakers, keep the volume reasonable, keep your eardrums safe, and I'll see you in the next lesson.